so much, Rai. Thank you for the kind introduction. And I would like to thank you and Margaret for bringing us all together today. For me, it's a true privilege and an honor to be here sharing this space with so many brilliant minds and distinguished speakers. Thank you so much for that. Now, let's get into building ethical systems, not monsters. In this presentation, we're going to look at how bias can quickly creep into AI systems, creating what I like to call monsters in data, algorithms, and code. We'll explore real-world examples, and we'll also draw lessons from 3 iconic films that illuminate the human side of these challenges. These stories hopefully should help us reflect on how we can build ethical systems that promote fairness and accountability. Right. Right. So how can we as humans act ethically in in the creation, management, and the use of AI systems, ensuring they serve humanity responsibly and with quality? Right. When quality and ethics are ignored, AI doesn't serve humanity. It turns into a monster. Now, the reason why I refer to AI systems, biased AI systems as monsters is because when we think about monsters in the movies, they cause fear, they cause anxieties, and bias at the end of the day, different types of bias. It could be in the workplace, it could be in terms of health, it could be in terms of policing and all that kind. They cause anxiety, they cause fear, and they can affect our mental health. So this is a key reason why I call bias systems monsters. So of course, not all systems are built with responsibility in mind. Some are, I mean, they're not intentionally done that way, but we need, once we get things into perspective, we'll be more careful about how we do things. So sometimes sometimes, whether through bias, poor design, or lack of proper governance, we create systems that don't serve humanity, as I've said before, they harm it. So in this presentation, we'll look at what happens when AI goes wrong and what lessons we can apply to avoid building monsters in real life. So I'm using films because for me, they provide a light and entertaining way of making complex issues like bias, ethics, and responsibility in AI both memorable and relatable. So now we're going to be talking about monsters, describing what monsters are. Because like the most terrifying creatures in literature and film, these systems are often built with good intentions but go horribly wrong when we ignore the consequences of design. So some of the monsters are powerful and so is AI. Once released, both can move beyond our control. And the monsters often look innocent. That's how the AIs look. They look innocent at first until the damage begins. Bias often works quietly, invisibly, harming people through unfair decisions in hiring, policing, healthcare, and more. Monsters are built from parts, just like AI systems are built from data, algorithms, and human choices. But when those parts are flawed, the whole becomes dangerous. Monsters reflect their creators, just as Frankenstein's creatures reflected Victor Frankenstein's ambition. He created this creature and eventually he neglected it. So biased AI reflects our societal blind spots and oversight gaps. Right, so I'm asking us to stop and reflect. Are we creating tools that serve humanity or systems that quietly harm it? What does it mean to be ethical? When we ask what does it mean to be ethical, this quote reminds us that ethics is about more than rules. So first, as Dr. Larry Kennedy would say, treat people the way you want yourself and your loved ones to be treated. So when we're designing these things, we need to consider how we would like ourselves to be treated and our loved ones. Also, all customers should be treated exactly the same way with attention to details they consider important. I'm going to say not just customers, but all stakeholders, including the systems themselves and other kinds of systems. And then the dictionary, Merriam-Webster describes ethical may suggest the involvement of more difficult or subtle questions of rightness, fairness, or equity. Right, so bias. Here are some quotes from renowned personalities. Bias can be innate or learned. People may develop bias for or against an individual, a group, or a belief. The question is not, do we have bias? The question is, which are ours? We need to really ask this everybody has got one bias or the other, every single soul. Human beings are poor examiners, subject to superstition, bias, prejudice, and profound tendencies to see what they want to see rather than what is really there. And then, as Maya Angelou said, prejudice is a burden that confuses the past, threatens the future, and renders the present inaccessible. So AI isn't just about algorithm, it's about people. And people bring bias. Sometimes the best way to understand bias is not always through data charts, but through stories we may already know and love. Now let's look at different types of bias or biases. So in this talk, I'm going to be dealing with three types of bias. Bias in the stories, as in the movies that I'm presenting, and then systematic bias, and AI bias, technical bias, bias in the system itself that cause unfair or inaccurate outcomes. So the bias in story drives the plot or influence how characters are perceived and treated. This mirror real-life discriminatory attitudes, while systematic bias often influences policies, practices, and opportunities. AI bias, we often think of monsters as fiction characters in shadows, but the real monsters today live in our machines or systems, as we will see in this presentation. AI bias such as algorithms already decide who gets a job, who is trusted, who receives care. They reject older applicants, misread darker skinned faces, and underestimate women and minorities. We're about to explore age, gender, and racial bias through the lens of cinema. So we're going to be talking about age, gender, and racial bias through The Intern. I don't know if how many of you have watched this movie, starring Robert De Niro, Anne Hathaway, and then The Hidden Figures, starring Taraji P. Henson, Octavia Spencer, and Janelle Monáe. And then Driving Miss Daisy, starring Morgan Freeman, Jessica Tandy, and Dan Aykroyd. If you've watched The Blues Brothers, you should know Dan Aykroyd. So cinemas cinemas often hold up a mirror to society showing us truth we rather ignore. And through these films, we can glimpse the very monsters that now live inside our machines. What do you think each film predominantly symbolizes? Cinema has been warning us for decades. The intent shows wisdom dismissed because of age. Hidden Figures reviews brilliance overshadowed by gender and race. Driving Miss Daisy exposes how quiet prejudice shapes lives. The lesson is clear. Unchecked bias creates monsters. The choice before us is ours. We will let them grow, or we will build ethical systems that reflect justice, dignity, and humanity. So the intent, workplace assumption, sorry about that. That was quick. So the intent is about, it's a fictional work. It's about Robert De Niro, who plays a 70-year-old widower known as Ben or Benjamin, entering a digital startup world that worships youth. His experience is dismissed before he even speaks. This is the monster of age, a prejudice that now lives inside algorithms, silently rejecting applicants not for their skills, but for their date of birth. So this movie has won different awards. The slides are available, so you can look at this at your own convenience. And the film also, my mouse is moving very fast. The film also stars Anne Hathaway as Jules Austin, the CEO of this e-commerce company. Now, lessons from the intent, bias in the story. So younger employees, this is individual and social prejudice, structured injustice, milder form. While less severe than in other films, corporate environments often design workflows, tech platforms, and training in ways that implicitly favor younger employees, sidelining older talents. Now, AI mirror recruitment algorithms that downgrade older applicants because they are trained on biased hiring histories, perpetuating systemic ageism even without human intent. So the lesson for AI is don't assume people are outdated. Even if the algorithm works as designed, it can learn to discriminate from the patterns it sees. Hidden Figures is based on a true life story. In Hidden Figures, three brilliant Black women at NASA fight to have their geniuses recognized. Their calculations to launch rockets into space, but the system around them only sees their gender and race. Today, the same monsters of gender and race lurk in data, algorithm, and code. They appear in hiring tools that downgrade women and their facial recognition systems that misread darker skinned faces. The struggle of women in 1960s America is not history. It's still happening today, only now in our technology, not just in our technology. That's an addition to what's already happening to women today. So this movie stars, as I said, was directed by Theodore Melfi and won a lot of awards. Lessons from Hidden Figures, institutional exclusion. The NASA workplace systematically limits the roles and recognitions given to Black women, such as exclusions from meetings. For instance, Catherine was not allowed into the space where the analyst and all the other men were allowed in. And a lack of promotion and even establishing segregated bathrooms. It also mirrors structured injustice. Discrimination is embedded in organizational policy and national law, not just personal attitudes. So we need to change that if we're going to create AI systems that are unbiased. Catherine Justin is assigned to an all-white male space task group where she fights for recognition, access to information to do her job, to the point that they even blocked some of the information. She had to put it against the light to be able to see what was in there because they didn't think she was worthy enough to be shown that the data. And she was even denied a working restroom. She had to travel to the ends of the earth just to ease herself. Jackson, on the other hand, battles to achieve her goal of becoming an engineer in a legal system that prevents Black women from gaining the necessary qualifications. Vaughan fights for a rightful promotion to be supervisor. She also works very hard to ensure that she and her team do not become irrelevant by the new IBM system. The lesson for AI is if the team building AI lacks diversity, the system would likely lack fairness. Driving Miss Daisy. Driving Miss Daisy is about an unlikely friendship between Daisy Wetham, an elderly Jewish widow, and Hoke Colburn, an African-American chauffeur, set against the backdrop of the American South during the civil rights era. The story unfolds over 25 years, showing how initial mistrust gives way to respect and genuine care. The film explores the theme of prejudice, racism, and friendship over a 25 period with Miss Daisy's initial disdain for Hoke, which developed into a deep, inseparable bond. Over time, the initial prejudice and friction between the two of them slowly dissolves. This movie was directed by Bruce Belford and also won a lot of awards. Lessons from Driving Miss Daisy. The slow, uneasy friendship between an elderly white woman and her Black chauffeur reveals how bias sits quietly in the everyday, shaping lives in ways both subtle and cruel. In the same quiet bias that feeds the monsters of race in AI algorithm, that brands Black defendants as high risk or that underestimates Black patients' needs. Just as Miss Daisy slowly learned to read Hawk or to trust Hawk, society is still learning to trust and question the systems we build. And like the film's characters, AI systems are shaped by the prejudice and blind spots of their drivers. The lesson for AI is bias in training data can be deeply rooted and slow to correct. If the data reflects a segregated past, the AI will repeat those injustices only faster. What is the hidden link between these three movies? Can anybody guess? Apart from bias, what's one common thing these three movies have in common? We shall see now. It's work related. In each story, the workplace becomes the setting where relationships grow and barriers are broken and bias is confronted. Each film illustrates a different layer of bias, from personal prejudice to deeply embedded structural exclusion. The one thing all three films have in common is that they challenge stereotype and prejudice by showing how unlikely partnerships or overlooked individuals break through societal biases to prove their values. These films remind us of something vital, that monsters are not born in silicon. They are born in us, our fears, our prejudices, our histories. When we build machines, we pass those monsters on. And unless we confront them with courage, accountability, and justice, the stories we see on screen will become the realities we live in. Modern AI systems often replicate these layers when they rely on biased data, flawed design processes, or narrow stakeholder representation. The danger is AI can make these biases faster, cheaper, and harder to detect. Aside from bias, as I've said, the common thing here is the workplace. We are now going to look at real-world tools illustrating AI bias across the three critical dimensions: age, gender, and race. So we're talking in terms of age, we have the AI recruitment tools, AI product design. The AI recruitment tools, they reject applicants due to age, gender, including women and men. I mean, due to age, including women and men. Older adults are underrepresented in AI interface and model design in technology in general. And then for the same issue with gender, facial recognition, GTP translations, a study in 2023 by Gosh and Kaliskan found that ChatGPT exhibited gender bias in translation when translating from gender-neutral pronoun languages like Bengali, Malay, Tagalog, Turkish into English. It tends to assign stereotypical roles like doctors for men and nurse for women and fails to preserve gender neutrality, reflecting ingrained biases. I think it's important to explain here before. And then there's the case of the underestimated Black patients' needs due to proxy variables. I need to explain what proxy is, just in case some people are not familiar with that term. So a proxy is a stand-in for something else. It is like a shortcut, like cutting corners in AI. When the system can't measure the things we really care about, it often uses another variable as proxy. For example, instead of measuring how good a job applicant is, an AI system might use where they went to university as proxy to determine their worth. So in the healthcare algorithm case, the system was meant to identify the sickest patient who needed extra help. But instead of measuring health directly, it used past healthcare spending as a shortcut, a proxy variable. The problem was that Black patients had historically received less medical care than white patients with the same conditions. So their spending looked lower on paper. The algorithm read this as less need, even though they were just as sick. As a result, it consistently underestimated Black patients' needs. AI tech with real-world failures. So now we'll discuss the real-world failures in detail. We'll discuss the real-world failures in detail. So data bias, you've got the gender, training data that does not adequately represent real-world diversity, such as the Amazon AI hiring tool. And then the algorithmic bias, the mathematical model amplifies patterns or produces skewed outcomes, even if data seems fair, like the compass recidivism algorithm. And then human design bias. These are designers' assumptions, choices, the bias I was talking about earlier, or oversight embedded into the systems. And an example is the iTutor Group AI hiring tool. So now use comparing or looking at them side by side, the movie and the AI age bias case study. So in the intern, 70-year-old Ben applies for an internship and is nearly dismissed because of his age until he's finally given the chance to prove the value of experience and wisdom. In real life, iTutor, a US e-learning company, built a recruitment algorithm that automatically rejected women over 55 and men over 60. The system wasn't looking at ability, it was screening people out purely because of age. In one striking example, an applicant applied her real date of birth and was rejected. Then she adjusted her date of birth to a later year and received a job interview offer. Together, they highlight why quality systems must respect human dignity, not reinforce discrimination. In 2023, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission oversaw a settlement of 365 million regarding iTutor Group. The similarity is obvious. Both the film and the scandal show how bias, whether human or algorithmic, can wrongly shut out talented and capable people. The intern reminds us that age should never be mistaken for irrelevance. And the iTutor Group case shows what happens when that bias gets baked into technology. Following the settlement, the company agreed to implement new non-discriminatory policies and compliance training. So the lessons for AI is that AI models must be checked to ensure that older adults are not excluded by implicit proxies or historical patterns. Data and decision logic must embrace people across all life stages. Hidden figures. All right, so AI-powered resume tools have preferred male or white-coded names. This is an interesting one. They diminish women's and people of color's application rankings or even penalize female-coded extracurricularities. So in hidden figures, so what I'm trying to say here is that screening tools, for example, if they see things like in CVs, if they see something like I belong to a woman's golf club, they will be discriminated against by the system. In hidden figures, we see brilliant Black women, mathematicians at NASA being overlooked because of race and gender bias, even though they had the talent and skills. Decades later, Amazon's experimental AI recruitment tool made the same kind of mistake. It was trained on past hiring data, which reflected a history of favoring men. As a result, the AI learned to downgrade CVs that included the words women, like in women's chess club, and it favored masculine associated language and male-dominated career patterns. The similarity is striking. In both cases, bias wasn't about ability, it was about the system, whether human or algorithm. I'm finding that difficult to pronounce, failing to see talent clearly. And this is exactly why quality and ethics matters in AI. If we don't address bias, we risk building systems that shut out the very people who could make the greatest contributions. The Amazon project was eventually scrapped in 2018 due to persistent bias. Amazon later implemented a version with human supervision. So the lesson is that AI must undergo intersectional fairness checks, ensuring fair outcomes for all gender and race. Transparency and stakeholder review are essential so that hidden biases can be surfaced and corrected. How am I doing for time? I'm sorry about this. I need to check my timer. Gee, right, okay.
Carry on, carry on.
Oh, thank you. So Driving Miss Daisy. The story in Driving Miss Daisy reveals subtle but persistent racial prejudices affecting trust, access, and relationship in everyday life. Miss Daisy's interaction with her Black chauffeur shows how assumptions and stereotypes influence behavior, and often without overt malice. The healthcare algorithm, as we see here, the one by Autumn AI bias, similarly disadvantaged Black patients by underestimating their medical needs. As I've stated already, the algorithm relied on cost-based proxies for care, unintentionally replicating historical inequalities in treatment. So both examples underscore that systems, social or technological, can perpetuate inequality if we fail to design them with awareness and fairness. The lesson here is that AI must take bias past behavior as truth. Like Daisy, systems must reconsider background assumptions, carefully audit for hidden prejudice in training data and proxies. So lessons in overcoming bias through human connection. The intent, Jews learned from Ben. Learn from Ben's patient's perspective, trust in experience, and work-life balance. Why Ben learned adaptability to the modern workplace, digital culture, and the value of innovation. Vaughan became the first African-American supervisor at NASA. Mary's fight for opportunity to attend advanced engineering, this is in hidden figures, to fight for advanced engineering course in an all-white high school and became NASA's first Black female engineer. Catherine's analytical geometry skill was trusted by astronaut John Glenn, he who personally requested that she re-verify the electronic computer's flight path calculations before its historical 1962 orbital mission. Her work ensured a safe journey to and back. Miss Daisy, on the other hand, and Hawk grew closer and more dependent on each other. These stories are not just about people, they are lessons for us in building ethical AI. In turn, cross-generational mentorship shows the value of diverse perspective, just as AI teams must bring in varied voices to spot blind spots and avoid biases. In Hidden Figures, Breaking Barriers shows that fairness requires patience, persistence, and inclusion. If we only allow certain data or voices into our systems, we risk repeating the same injustice AI is meant to solve. And in Driving Miss Daisy, mutual dependency reminds us that progress comes when humans learn from each other's strengths. In AI, that means designing systems that support human dignity rather than replace or diminish it. Together, these films remind us that ethical AI is just a technical challenge. It isn't just a technical challenge, it is a human one. So I'm just going to, so the cross-film lesson for AI is audit and diversity, challenging the proxies, ongoing human supervision, empathy, and transparency. We're going to look at these things in more depth. So inspired by Tom Gill's, Tom Gill's value improvement method, I got the AI to generate the film and AI case study, stakeholders and values, and this is what it came up with. So I asked it to do critical stakeholders and critical stakeholders values, less critical stakeholders and less, so that you focus on the critical ones, and then when there's time, you deal with the less critical ones. So in the intern, the critical stakeholders are Ben, and the older employee, Jules, and then their value is opportunity to contribute skills, dignity, respect for experience, inclusion, purpose at work, mentorship. For the CEO is productivity, mentorship, value. Driving Miss Daisy, she wanted independence. Sorry about that. She wanted, um, okay. Um, right. Okay, so in terms of ratio, I'm just going to go over this quickly. Critical stakeholders, Hawk Corbin, the black chauffeur, minority employees, HR managers, supervisors, legal ethic teams, the value is job stability, personal dignity, professional acknowledgement, trust, equal access to facilities, promotion, and all that. You can check this later when you get the slides. And in terms of the AI systems, the critical stakeholders are women applicants, users, women developers, women decisions. They should be included in the designing of AI. And their value is equal treatment in recommendations, hiring, pay, career progression. And then in terms of ratio, we have the Compass risk assessment. So facial recognition systems misidentifying Black individuals at higher rates. So the critical stakeholders are minority ethnic users, minority data scientists, Black people applying for jobs, loans, or facing policing systems. So their critical values are accurate representation, fair outcomes, equal treatment, trust in systems, safety, fair facial recognition, reduce false positives. Whew. And then for in terms of systemic bias, which is the critical stakeholders are the company policies that undervalue older workers, and the critical values are career continuation. And for the compass, you have the critical stakeholders are disadvantaged groups, AI ethic boards, AI policymakers, AI governance bodies, senior executive at AI firms, and the values are breaking structural inequalities, ethical AI standards, long-term trust, compliance, regulatory control. So I also asked the system to get me critical, I can hardly say this because of, to get me critical qualities of an unbiased AI system. And it came up with these values. Came up with this quality. So transparency, we should disclose the data sources, algorithm, decision logic to identify and address bias effectively, high quality representative data, continuous monitoring and adjustment, explainability, which I think Pyrus addressed explainability earlier on. Clearly explain how decisions are made and which factors influence outcomes, increasing trust and enabling error detection, ethical guidelines and standards, diverse team input, as we said, very important, accountability, privacy and security, fairness, internal auditing, and the reasons why these are critical are on the side. You can read this later. And then I asked it to also give me 20 critical stakeholders for an unbiased AI system. So by the way, this is based on Tom Gill value improvement method. And then he gave me all these critical stakeholders, and then the reason why they are critical. AI developers, data scientists, AI ethic experts, regulators, auditors, industry leaders, end users, civil society groups, organizational leaders, human computer interactions and this. So these are the one on the left are the most critical. The one on the right are the ones we should consider after them. And then top 10 strategies that raise measured value in the workplace. So leadership commitment is because we're talking about the workplace. I think if we're going to have ethical AI systems, it starts with the people involved in designing and creating and managing the AI system. So this is the top 10 strategies that raise measured value in the workplace. So leadership, commitment to inclusion, and all that. If we want AI systems that are fair, ethical, and truly serve society, then the strategies for unbiased quality AI must mirror the strategies for unbiased workplaces. It begins with leadership, commitment to inclusion, because ethical AI needs champions at the top who set the tone. And in hidden figures, for example, what did she say now? Catherine, uh, Al Harrison asked, who makes the decisions around here? And Catherine said something like, the boss, you're the boss and you need to act like one. I'm not quoting her directly, but something like that. It's a famous quote. So it continues with inclusive and equitable hiring practices, ensuring diverse teams who can identify risk and blind spots that other may dismiss, pay and promotion reviews, safe spaces, mentorship and sponsorships, reminds us that equity is not a one-time task. It is a continuous culture of support and opportunity. Similarly, in AI, we must regularly audit, test, and refine systems to ensure fairness over time. Anti-bias training, DEI as in diversity, equity and inclusion task forces, accountability mechanisms, transparent reporting and inclusive communications all highlight the same truth. Bias thrives in silence, but it can be reduced through openness, checks, and active corrections. In the end, these are not just HR strategies, they are also AI quality strategies. Both require courage, consistency, and commitment to fairness if we are to build systems that people can trust. So now I did, and based on Tom Gill's value improvement method, I did top 10 value impact estimation table based on the film to see which if we're to going to deal with in terms of priority, which ones should we is most important to these stakeholders I've just talked about? And trust in stakeholders want to be able to trust the organizations they are working in, so that the bias can be eradicated or we can mitigate against bias in AI. So trust is a very key thing, as we can see here. And then in terms of AI itself, so this represents the film, I say the value, the highest, the most important value here in terms of film, and then the AI is here, and that is compliance. So I'll ask you a question. Which one of them will you deal with first? If you were to make a decision, will you decide to deal with trust in organizations first, or will you decide to do with compliance? And then, based on Dr. Larry Kennedy, this is the price of non-conformance and values of carrying out those strategies. So all of them together. So these are the values here, and this is the price of non-conformance. And then this is the resources and transactional cost and value. If leadership commit to inclusion, then there will be clear ethical guidance, inclusive and fair culture, and the costs, the resource and transactional cost and value will be improved productivity, lower litigation costs, wasted. If we don't conform, the bias will persist. There'll be low morale, low trust, legal risk, and wasted management time. And then the positive and negative impact on AI systems, ethical, fair, and trustworthy AI. If you don't conform, bias models, reduced user trust, and so on and so forth. So now when we comparing this to the movies, when we talk about bias in AI, there's always a price, as I said. In the interim, if Jews had ignored Ben, she would have lost wisdom and stability. That's the cost. But by embracing mentorship, she gained resilience and better leadership, just like AI teams gain when they include diverse perspectives. In Hidden Figures, NASA initially sidelined Catherine, Dorothy, and Mary. The cost of that exclusion was delayed progress. The value of inclusion, once they broke barriers, was nothing less than reaching space. In AI, failing to include underrepresented voices means missed innovations and flawed systems. Inclusion leads to breakthroughs. And in Driving Miss Daisy, Daisy resisted Hoke at first. Her isolation was the cost, but when trust and communication grew, the value was friendship and dignity. Similarly, with AI, if we ignore transparency and accountability, mistrust grows. But if we embed them, we build systems people can depend on. The lesson is clear. The true measure of quality in AI isn't just efficiency. It is the value of fairness, inclusion, and trust, which always outweighs the cost of ignoring them. Now, so conclusion. Katherine Johnson, the mathematician, asked Mary Jackson how she would possibly be ogling the white men. And she says, it's equal right to have the right to see fine in every color. So I'm encouraging us to see fine in every color as we create, build, manage, design the AI. In the intent, Ben says you're never wrong to do the right thing. The right thing is diversity, get everybody involved. Hawk, Miss Daisy says to Hawk, Hawk, you're my best friend. Once we come together and begin to understand each other, we will build that trust and become best friends and build systems with integrity, fairness, and respect, and we'll never build monsters. Thank you very much.